Thanks for joining us again on Comcast Newsmakers. I'm Amy Allison. One of the things I just love about the Bay Area is the fact that you can still see amazing wildlife when you're driving down the highway. And you might, out of the corner of your eye, have seen a beautiful hawk like the one that's visiting us today. Dawn Manley from the Lindsay Wildlife Museum in Walnut Creek has brought this gorgeous hawk to visit. What kind of hawk is this, Dawn?
This is a Swensons Hawk. And these hawks are native here to California and the Midwestern United States. You're actually going to find Swensons Hawks living more in the Central Valley these days. Historically, they were found more on this side of the mountains, but now you find them living in agricultural fields in the Central Valley.
And how did this hawk come to be at the Lindsay Wildlife Museum?
She actually came to the museum in 2000, and she suffered some head trauma, and she ended up losing her left eye. And so she only has one eye, can't be released into the wild because of hunting would be diminished because they need that that vision that helps them locate their prey. And so without that eye, it would make it a lot harder for her to hunt. Although otherwise, she's perfectly healthy. She has both of her wings.
She looks like she'd weigh a lot.
She actually doesn't. She only weighs about 2 pounds, which is normal for a female Swensons hawk. They could get up to about 3 pounds. And they're a little bit smaller than red-tailed hawks that we normally see around the Bay Area here.
You often see hawks around freeways, highways when you're driving. Why do they tend to be in those locations?
Well, usually the red-tailed hawks you're going to see on the sides of the freeways, and there's a lot of grassland and weeds and things, and that's where all the good mammals like the gophers and the voles and the squirrels are going to be hanging out. So it's a perfect hunting ground for hawks.
So she in the wild would eat a gopher? Or
they actually eat, the majority of their diet is things like gophers and voles and rabbits. And then the thing about Swensons hawks that makes them different and unique from red-tailed hawks is they are actually highly migratory, and they'll go all the way down to South America in the winter, and during their migrations they'll actually feed on large grasshoppers.
Do they, and are they kind of, do they travel in groups when they migrate, or are they sort of solo?
No, when they're wintering and they're hanging out down in South America, they will actually congregate in large groups and feast on grasshoppers, really. So they change their diet completely during their migration, which is really interesting.
In California, birds, especially large birds of prey, have been endangered or threatened with endangerment. Talk a bit about not only this hawk, but other types of birds in California.
Sure. Well, Swensons hawks are actually right now, they're a threatened species in California, and it's mainly because of habitat loss for these birds. And they really like to hang out in those grassland, the alfalfa fields and agricultural areas. And unfortunately, a lot of that is getting changed over into housing and industrial, and so they're losing their habitat. They like big open areas, not a lot of trees. Like red-tails will be living in more areas that have more trees, where Swensons like it wide open. Perfect land for development. So unfortunately, they're losing a lot of their habitat. And then the other thing is, you know, when they feed on those insects, if we're using insecticides and sprays for pests, then that can actually harm them a lot. So
do they die from eating?
They can die from eating insects that have been feeding on pesticides. And so we've seen a decrease in their numbers over the past decade. And so we're actually working, you know, to help their population stabilize, and
just by making sure that there's I mean, it looks like she's stretching her wing.
Yep.
Just to make sure there's enough space and healthy food for the birds to eat. Talk to me about condors, because they've been in the news lately.
Yeah, actually, condors are coming back from the brink of extinction. There's actually about 300 pairs or 300 individuals alive now. 155 are in the wild. And the best place to see condors around here is going to be in the Big Sur area. And we actually have an exhibit opening at the museum here. It's going to be running from the middle of March until the middle of July. And it's called Bringing Home the Condors. And it's brought on by the Ventana Wildlife Society.
Excellent.
Yeah, and it's going to be art, photos, all sorts of great things.
Wonderful. A place to learn about and celebrate condors and other birds.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Dawn Manley, for coming from the Lindsay Wildlife Museum.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us today on Comcast Newsmakers. We'll see you next time.